What is up, everyone? It is me, DevilNeverCry, and you join me for Chapter 2 of Ninja Gaiden 4 Master Ninja Difficulty, titled Haunted District. This mission is going to be a little bit shorter than the previous one, and, at least by my measure, a whole lot easier. This chapter basically starts out with a whole bunch of platforming, which I should probably mention that if you're able to complete all of the platforming sequences where you're on the wire or on the rail, so to speak, you'll be able to unlock a trophy or an achievement provided you are able to do so without taking any damage, which means not messing it up, so to speak. And if you do, then you might as well just basically exit out of the game, load back in, and you should have a checkpoint just before you took damage somewhere, which makes it a lot easier to attain. Means you don't have to replay the entire mission, thankfully. And I can confirm that I was able to do so. Not the first time round when I was playing it on normal, but we do get it at the end of this video, actually, which I guess is a cool touch. But yeah, for the first few minutes or so, not going to be much combat or difficulty here. Just pay attention. They haven't sped up the platforming, thankfully, which typically games would do. But we're going to start off with an assassination here. Again, that mechanic that kind of just does nothing. Doesn't really mesh with anything else. And then we've got 3 enemies to basically take care of as we get a couple parries. And because there are only 3, I'm kind of just not really prioritizing the dude in the back with the projectiles. Kind of just going for whoever's closest. Going for the Azuna drops, but at this point you should know the bread and butter. We're just going to find our way into a blood essence somehow, through whatever means necessary. Even using some bloodbind attacks, which I must have really been feeling myself considering how unsafe those moves are with the insidiously long charge time. But yeah, we're going to get some essence, and then we're going to hit him with a couple of ultimate techniques. The enemies do love to guard, particularly in mid-air. We're going to see that more and more. But yeah, there's no point because this dude was basically waiting for an obliteration technique. As we've got more weapon skills to unlock. Eventually I go through and spend the rest of my experience to max out the weapons in terms of skill set, but that's going to be a little bit later on. Not really much to do here, just some platforming, and then it's not going to be long before we're introduced to these drones which you're able to hook to in midair. You're going to see a bit of a fade here. So I took my first death here from some silly behavior, but we end up basically making our way straight to the dude at the top after using the Kage Hideko's Bloodbind move. Probably my most used Bloodbind move, but there's this dude at the top you can wire to and skip a whole lot of platforming and combat if you're able to line things up just right, which thankfully we were able to. And it's not going to be long before we hit him with a obliteration technique, split into 4 pieces, drawn and quartered perhaps. Probably one of the most brutal obliteration technique sort of animations we have. And I'm contemplating here at this point, do I want to go back and finish the rest of those enemies? And then I'm just like, no, we don't need to. We just need to make it to the end. Which, if you're unaware, the amount of enemies you kill within a level will affect your rank at the end. So, yeah, you get more points effectively for killing all the enemies, if that makes sense. That dude just disappeared off the edge and we've just got this one person. But yeah, not too tricky of a start here before we are basically thrust into more platforming, which I'm kind of torn apart. The platforming is not really much challenge, if I'm honest, but it does make for a nice sort of break of pace almost. It's not too overbearing, but there's not really much input required by the player. It feels like Yakumo goes really slow on these rails. Obviously these blue portals, the false stargates, do speed things up a little bit, but not enough to my liking. As the world kind of is malformed once more. Very reminiscent of Limbo from the DMC reboot almost, how the environment shifts and changes, albeit it's nowhere near as colourful. It's just like everything's drenched in red, which is apt considering the amount of red and blood this game sort of focuses on despite its heavy blue tint. But we're dipping, dodging, ducking, diving, whatever the 5Ds are. I'm spamming the shurikens here because there's not really much else to do. Jumping definitely will make you faster. Leaning forward does nothing. And before long, we're rounding out almost to the end of this sequence here. And we have a nice enemy there at the end to assassinate. This first part of this combat sequence isn't too bad. The difficulty does ramp up a little bit with some of the spawns near the end, but we'll get to that when we get to that. And yeah, I almost just get absolutely wrecked there with the platforming, but we saved it right at the end. That move's pretty good in how it kind of gets you almost airborne, and it's got a nice wide range to it, but yeah, it's not something that I use quite often. On this difficulty at least. On normal I used it all the time just because of its capability to stun as that dude gets thrown out into the air, and then there you go. Shows you how quickly things can change with this dude just showing up out of nowhere, hitting you with the long range attacks you can barely see coming, but ultimate techniques are saving grace here. That dude managed to survive that, and this other dude's almost got my name on his death note, on his kill list. But we've got some essence, so we're going to chain it. Don't disregard how powerful the standard block is. I know we have a penchant for focusing on dodging, perfect dodges, perfect blocks, but the standard block can get you out in a pinch, as we get another fade there, which indicates that this this upcoming encounter definitely cooked me at one point. We've got a couple of these aerial drones here for good measure. I don't really use them because it's not really needed, if I'm honest, until you start facing the ones that are airborne. I think we took this guy's legs out, so we could have just hit him with an obliteration technique, but that was a missed opportunity. We've got the dude with a big windmill shurikens we need to be careful of. This is the one that likes to teleport around the battlefield. So we kind of just stun lock him with a Kage Hiroko, which you got to be careful because it does use your bloodbind gauge. And, you know, if you're basically run out of it, you're not able to keep stun locking people. So just keep an eye on it as we block that so-called stinger. And then he's down and out for the count. And then we've got the aerial enemies, and this is kind of where these drones come into play. What you could do, and what you probably should do, is wire up to them and hit them with a Nizuna drop. But if you're able to knock them out of the air whilst they're over the edge, they will just fall straight to their death. Yeah, I've got some essence here, which I'm going to try and chain, yeah. Got to make sure you keep an eye out for essence that's well away on the battlefield. That dude hits the wall and he's now down and out for the count. We've got some essence behind us we can use, which I take a sloppy hit there. But so far, so good. As we've got the dude in the background still peppering us, but thankfully the invincibility frames does its justice, and we've got this dude again. Bane of my existence, honestly, these rockets. But who here so far in the comments has managed to tackle Master Ninja mode? And if you have, how have you been finding the difficulty? I know some people have been starting with hard, which is interesting. There's a few comments I've seen from people who mentioned they fans of the Souls series, Sekiro, whatever, and you know they want the additional challenge, so they've not played in Ninja Gaiden, they're starting hard and they're finding it quite tricky. I will say there is nothing wrong with bumping the difficulty back down to normal, particularly if you want to take the time to learn how enemies basically act during combat, what moves you can use, how Yakumo controls. There is a steep learning curve to the game, doubly so if you've not played a Ninja Gaiden before, even with how different this sort of feels to standard Ninja Gaiden. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with putting your ego aside. But I was saving the Bloodbath Slaughter for this enemy in particular, which is who took me out the first time while we had to get the old crossfade in. But taking out him and a couple of enemies has managed to get us some essence, so we should be able to take both of these out without too much difficulty. And then we've got the one dude who's still in the air. And just be careful of these guys, because they do a lot of damage, more damage than you'd think. They stun like you with the bullets. But yeah, but then also I'm seeing people mention that they've played previous Ninja Gaiden games and they're finding this one to be like much harder or normal. And it's not something that I've found to be the case. I feel like this feels almost easier given, the amount of items you have access to, as we get a crossfade there as we enter the shrine. But yeah, considering the amount of items you have access to, doesn't feel that way. Even without using items, like on normal, for me, I found it to be much easier. But it's a point of opinion, subjective, as we absolutely cock up the platforming there. Do find it interesting how they actually do have different jumping animations during those sequences. Yeah, heading that other direction leads you to like almost a side mission, I believe. So, considering we don't need to do it, we're gonna make our way through the rest of the chapter. One standard Nizuna drop took him out, thankfully. Just head bust like a melon. This dude's doing his best to use the old block button, but a Bloodbind move will stun him. But as you can see, yeah, these guys love to block, and they've even got moves that can damage you whilst they're dodging, so you gotta really be careful. We're back into another sequence, which, as I said, not really much difficulty, so kind of use it as a breather, or don't if you're planning to get their trophy or achievement. And eventually you're gonna come across some drones, which I'm shooting out of the air right now, and if you're not careful, what they can do is they will drop additional hurdles to jump over, so it's always worth hitting them with some shurikens if you can. I don't tend to use shurikens themselves all too much in combat. You can use it particularly to stun some enemies or get some suspended airtime slightly if you need to. But yeah, they're kind of almost like throwing sticks and stones at enemies. So we just about get through that cascade of different obstacles, and then when the camera changes, you basically know you're in the clear. And then the next mission, I believe, after this, the next chapter, I should say, we're going to have a little bit of a change of pace in terms of the scenery and the environment. There's a lot of discourse online regarding the story of this game and the environments. I think if you want to judge them on the environments, sure, that's one thing that you can sort of, chastise the game for, especially with what they've done with Ryu's sequences, just going back through environments that we already know. I've seen people mention that the environments are quite barren, but like it's an action game. Interactivity is not really a big part of it. We do try and take this thing on, but again, as I said, there's generally no point if you've not got it, or if you have got it already, sorry. But yeah, the environments are okay. I mean, DMC5, that game you spent most of it inside of a tree, which basically looks like the rooms were copied and pasted. And that was rightly chastised. But here it feels like there is more variety in the levels. The story in particular is getting a lot of flack. Again, I will say, the story isn't necessarily the main aim for Ninja Gaiden games, or for character action games in general. But, on the flip side of that, you've got games like DMC3, for example, where the story of that is cherished and loved, and the characters themselves are cherished and loved, which, yeah, this doesn't quite hit. I say it definitely doesn't hit the heights of that game. But I think it's fair to say that there's nothing wrong with wanting to have a better story for the game, but it certainly isn't why a lot of people would play Ninja Gaiden games. There's also been some discourse as to where exactly this falls in the timeline of the Ninja Gaiden games, specifically between the 2D and 3D games. So this is obviously right at the tail end, well after Ninja Gaiden 3. But how exactly does it sort of stack up to the 2D games, the side-scrollers? Been seeing a lot of discourse of people trying to figure that out, but I am definitely not the right person to ask, on that case at least. As we round out this sequence, this is the last platforming sequence, then I believe we're taken straight onto the boss. And the boss is going to be a bit of a different tempo to the previous, the DDO Commander. Primarily because, as I mentioned, it's got additional enemies in the room, which I absolutely hate when games do this. There's no point in making a boss where the difficulty doesn't come from the boss's design itself, but from having to throw in a bunch of different random enemies, which aren't even unique to the boss, by the way, just to add pressure in the fight itself. I think it's a really cheap way of adding difficulty, if I'm honest. And here we are. So the first point of call here is going to be to take out the enemies up in the air. It's just best practice. And the thing is I start to realize is that these enemies will just continuously respawn once you kill them all. And we're going to see that eventually too. I did die a few times. Let me know down in the comments below how many times you think I died. We're going to find out at the end of this. But yeah, once you've taken out the aerial enemies, try and take out or whittle out some of the numbers of the ones on the floor. Be careful of the areas with electricity on them. I tried to hop on top of that box, much to no avail. As you can see, the aerial enemies have spawned in again, which is not great, if I'm honest. But this dude's hammer loves to throw these area of effects on the floor, which will do a lot of damage if you're not careful. It's infuriating. You got enemies to contend with, the boss to contend with, and then these ridiculous sort of area of effects, which, on normal, not something that I was concerned with, but on this difficulty where everything does stupid damage, they can take you out a lot quicker than you'd expect. But yeah, as you can see here, like whittling out the numbers of the ads is doing nothing. Literally doing nothing, because they just keep respawning. But we've got to get rid of this dude with a rocket launcher because he's arguably more lethal than the boss itself. I don't even know what hit me there, but I'm taking damage, as you can see. And this dude only has 1 health bar, so don't be alarmed that your attacks aren't doing anywhere near the amount of damage they did on the previous boss. Once we get this dude's bar down to 0, he's basically gone, and that's the fight over. Why they've decided to do it this way, I don't know. I'd argue it's probably because this dude doesn't really have much of a second phase to him. So there wasn't really any need to demarcate that second phase with a second health bar. But yeah, you really have to juggle a lot in this fight. Put on many different hats, so to speak. I'm trying to basically get some blood essence at the moment to try and just hit him with an ultimate technique. We're taking out the guy with the shurikens because he's, again, a lot more mobile than the boss and a lot more mobile than all of the other enemies. So we managed to get the decap on that enemy. And he's the one that takes me out first. Infuriating, genuinely. But it's fine. We're going to get rid of him quite quickly. And then we're going to hit him with a perfectly timed ultimate technique. Any later and that would have basically just one-shot me. So I'm glad we managed to pull it off. Right, are there any other ads now? No, so I think for now we're... Ooh, that was a pretty heavy hit to take. I think for now we're okay. I don't believe that there are any more enemies that spawn in, but I may stand corrected, we'll see. I think if we're able to take him out quick enough, it should be fine. But yeah, the Kage Hidoku there does a lot of damage. I think it's because we basically stunned him out of an attack that he was trying to throw our way. Which is, it's ridiculous. A lot of the standard attacks do no damage. Like ultimate techniques do no damage. So it literally takes having to break their guard or stag them out of an attack to actually do any kind of damage which feels cathartic or useful. And it's one of the things that, yeah, you either love or hate about the game. But that's that boss basically done. As I jump for joy there. And I stand on top of these drones, not realizing that they do damage when they crash. So don't stand on them if you have low health, because it will kill you. They're trying to tutorialize the bloodbath slaughter here, which is why they throw these enemies in, so don't be alarmed. Just make sure that you position yourself correctly to take out all of the enemies with a move, and you should be fine.
Taking out the pylon now.
And for good measure, I'm just I'm standing on top of them. And then, yeah, we just play the standard waiting game of having to wait for the door to open as I look for any nefarious secrets, though there are none. And that's going to be basically the end of this video as we come up across the results screen and we find out how many deaths we have as we unlock The Grind Never Stops. 6 deaths in total, a far cry from the 85 of the previous one, and we used only 4 items and we weren't actually even penalized for it, which is quite peculiar. But with all that said and done, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.